I have sent 234,000 emails in just the last 90 days, with an open rate over 43% and a click rate over 1.57%. No, these are not listing alerts. These are email newsletters sent to our database. In this video, I'm going to break down the entire process that we follow from start to finish, no pun intended, so that you can start your email newsletter this week, sending it to your database. You might be wondering why an email newsletter is so important, and I've got two major points to you, and these are really more case studies. Is number one, email has helped us do over 300 transactions just in the last 2 years since we started doing email marketing. It's been a little over 2 years, but in the last 2 years, we've done over $300 million in transactions and 300 deals, and a large part of it is by engaging in our database and converting leads at a higher level by building know, like, trust at scale. Number two is on a recruiting side, we run an email newsletter to attract agents to our company, Onyx Homes, and we have attracted over 50 agents just in the last 12 months, and a large part of that are people that have been in our email list for well over a year, looking at the constant value that we provide the marketplace, and they say, hey, this is more valuable than what I was seeing over here, so they make the move. Now, I have 7 steps that I'm going to cover in this video, and by the end of it, like I said earlier, you should be able to implement this into your business, and it's a lot easier than you might think. And make sure to not skip number 7, because that is absolutely the most important part. Okay, step number 1 is understanding why email is important. If you don't understand why it's important, or why I feel like it's important, why it's been really important for our business, you might think, Christian, I don't need an email newsletter anyway. And by the way, if I haven't introduced myself, welcome. My name is Christian Stubbs. I'm an owner and team leader of a real estate sales team called Onyx Homes based out of Southern California. In the first 5 years in the business, we have sold over $500 million in sales and almost 600 units. And email marketing has been a large part of our company's growth, which is why I'm so adamant that this is something you should implement into your business right away, because I've just seen so much positive growth from it. But anyway, let's dive into step number 1, which is understanding why email is important in the first place. And the point number 1 is leverage. The definition of leverage is what you get out of what you put in. Now, if you have something incredibly important that you need to send to your database, regardless of how big it is, unless you have a really small database and you're just getting started, you're not going to be able to talk to everybody and deliver that message to them. Now, certainly I run a team and I'm not personally in sales anymore, but when I have an important message that I want to deliver to my database, I can spend an hour putting together an email and I can send that out and reach tens of thousands of people, and I can do that every single week. So understanding leverage is the number 1 thing. It also builds know, like, trust at a really high level. I'll give you a story later in the video about when I was making phone calls into our database, and I was kind of blown away of the amount of people that really knew who I was without me ever talking to them before. They had seen emails, they had seen YouTube videos like this, and they immediately felt like a connection there. It also does a really good job of filtering your database. So if you do have a large database, you can see who is engaging versus who is not and spend more time on the people that are engaging. Also, if you have a smaller database, you're going to be building this over time. And to be honest, when I first started, I just posted in my community the very first video market update that I made, and I was cringing at it, even though I had a videographer film it with more of a budget of what I have now, and this looks 100 times better than my first video. So starting sooner is always better. But anyway, back to understanding why email is important. It really, at the end of the day, is just leverage. When you're on the phone, you can talk to one person at a time, and when you're on email, you can talk to your whole list. Not that everybody's going to open and click, but everybody's going to see that you're giving them something valuable. Okay, so that's step number 1. Now, step number 2 is the building blocks of how to actually set up your email newsletter. Number 1 is you have to have an email service provider. Now, this is not your Gmail or Outlook or Yahoo or whatever you're using. This is a totally separate platform to send mass emails to your database. So I've used several different services. I've used MailChimp, I've used ActiveCampaign. The service that we currently use is ConvertKit. There are 2,000 other ones out there, and honestly, if your team or your brokerage provides something, like we have a CRM follow-up boss that has a mass email feature, you could just use that. So my point here is just pick something and use it. I'll give you, since I know everybody's gonna ask, we use ConvertKit for 2 reasons. 1, it's incredibly simple, and it allows us to see more data than some of the more rudimentary ones. We get to see click rates and open rates, who's clicking on different things, but it's super simple and it's cheap. So this doesn't have to be something that breaks the bank. But you need to pick what your email service provider is. Honestly, do 20 minutes of research and go pick one. And a pro tip here with your email service provider is you are not a large corporation. You are likely a solo agent, maybe you're growing a team. The most expensive email service provider is not necessarily the best. We just need something that works and something that you understand and is easy. All right, step number 3 is setting up the structure of your emails, which includes your goal. So I'm gonna share with you the actual structure that I write every single email with, but there's a couple of points that I want to use here as well too. Is don't use a fancy template with your logo and your company colors and all the fluff. Newsletters that perform the best are text-based. Now you might have a graphic in there here or there, a chart if you're doing a market update, things like that. But we're not looking for an email newsletter that has 87 listings on it and what's going on in the market and community event that's going on. None of this stuff. In our experience, we went from sending a newsletter like that and we had 10 to 15% open rates. When we switched to a text-based, value-based newsletter, we saw that open rate go from 15 to 50%, and we averaged 43%. So the marketplace has told us that this text-based, value-based newsletter is way better than the pretty fluff that nobody seems to like anyway. Now also with your newsletter, we're gonna get to this in a minute, there's a lot more you can do with it. But a newsletter could just be text, so if you don't like being on camera like this, that is okay. And to be honest, our emails that don't have a video in it actually perform just as well, if not better, than our ones with videos in it. Now, having said that, I know obviously you're here on YouTube or wherever you're watching this, you're watching a video, so you like video, but Bob over there might not like watching video, he doesn't like the sound of my voice, or he doesn't like what I look like, so he'd rather just read the information. So we always put it in both forms. So our email newsletter, I'll give you the structure here in a second, is the whole piece of content in the email, and we also have a video for them to watch. We also post it on our blog. I'll get to all that in a minute. Now, before I get to the actual structure of how you should frame your video, you have to make sure you have a goal for the email newsletter before you start writing anything. So you want to make sure you know what you're trying to accomplish and the topic, obviously, before you start writing. But here's the structure. You're going to have a hook, and then you add a few lines that'll tee up your video. And then if you have a video newsletter, you're going to include an image of like a thumbnail, like a YouTube thumbnail, right? Think of it like that with the play button on it. Now, you're not going to embed the video in the email, and I'll tell you why in a second. You're just going to take a really low quality picture of it, make sure it's a small file size, and you'll put it right after the first little blurb. So you have a hook, it's going to grab somebody's attention, then you have a little blurb, and then you'll have the thumbnail image. And then after that, you're going to go through and you're going to give the body text, and you're going to give 1, 2, and 3. Now I'll put on the screen right now an example of what our email newsletter might look like if I'm going over a list of 5 things. So the reason you don't embed the video in the email is because it makes it heavy. It's the same reason you want a low quality, small picture on there, is because the lighter your email is, the better it's going to deliver to your audience. So if you have 10,000 people on your email list and you send a really, really heavy email, Gmail and Yahoo and Outlook are all gonna receive that email, and they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is gonna take a lot of space. So they oftentimes will send that to the promotions tab, because that's what promotions look like anyway. So if you're just text-based with a thumbnail, it's gonna be really easy. So I hope that makes sense. Now you're gonna end the structure with a PS. Now I do this on probably 90% of the emails that I send, and the PS is where you would put your call to action. Not every single one of your email newsletters needs a call to action, but if I'm gonna put one in there, I'm usually gonna put it in the postscript down at the bottom of the email. Now here's a funny story for you. When I'm at a family event, like a barbecue with my wife's family, I almost 100% of the time have somebody come up to me talking about the email they got from me, or the most recent market update, or even better, I'll hear somebody talking about the housing market, and they're using the exact words that I said in my market update, meaning they were watching the video and they're talking about the housing market using the knowledge that I gave them. And I'll give you one even better, is one of the people that is always at these family barbecues was on a Facebook thread in a connection page for Mission Viejo, a local city. And somebody was saying anonymously, hey, I'm thinking about making a move. Should I buy or should I wait? And this person posted, hey, tag me, Christian always provides a ton of value, you should sign up for his email list, and then dropped just the link to sign up for my newsletter, which, by the way, if you want to check it out yourself, go to ocmarketupdates.com. You can jump on our consumer email newsletter. But anyway, I woke up to like 75 new leads of people on our email newsletter just by this one Facebook post of somebody else recommending it because she found it valuable, and 75 other people overnight registered for that. So yes, this is absolutely something that works, and when it is really high quality content, you're gonna get way more traction from it as well too. All right, so that's step number 3. Now let's move on to step number 4, which is frequency. How often are you gonna be sending this email? Now, I'm gonna set up this conversation telling you what I do, but let me kind of go through the reality of this. Is if you send an annual recap or a quarterly newsletter, your leads really don't even know who you are. If that's your only touch point to them, a quarterly email, they don't have a clue who you are. If you're sending something monthly, which in my personal opinion is the absolute bare minimum for you to be sending to your database, absolutely bare minimum once a month, and that should be a market update. This is a pro tip. Our monthly market updates, what I actually just finished filming right before I did this, is the highest performing newsletter almost every single month that we get, is what is going on in the market. And you know, as a real estate agent, the number one question that you get asked is, how's the market? Now, if you're sending an email every other week or twice a month, you're going to be sending a monthly market update and one valuable piece of information every month. So you're going to send your 12 market updates and you're going to send 12 valuable pieces of information. Now, here is why we send a weekly email newsletter, is we're going to send 12 market updates, just like you would if you were doing 2 a month. And we're also going to get 40 additional value emails to our database as opposed to 12. And this is almost a 4 times bigger difference, and it isn't 4 times as much work. I mean, it technically is because you have to make more videos, but you're gonna get so much better. You're gonna get better 4 times faster. You're gonna get 4 times more content in a year. So this is what we do. We also noticed a huge increase in open rate when we went to a weekly newsletter versus a monthly. And it's because the people who are actually engaging with your email are going to be expecting it. We send ours every Friday, not saying that's when you should send yours. We did a lot of testing to figure out Friday evening was the best. So our people kind of expect to see an email from me at 6 o'clock or so on every single Friday. So again, if you want to see how we do it, go to ocmarketupdates.com. You can just register right there. It's totally free. Just drop your email. Now, I mentioned this story earlier, but I'll give you the details of it. Is I was testing phone scripts in our pond of leads. We have 20,000 unclaimed leads with our team, and I was just making phone calls to practice different opening scripts. And the amount of people who answered the phone and were hesitant at first, and then once they realized who I was, they were happy to talk on the phone. They were like, hey, you're that guy that's sending me emails every week. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm not moving anytime soon, but I really appreciate you sending that information. Keep sending it. And I could not believe, I only made about 100 phone calls just to test different opening scripts, but I would say I probably, of the people that I talked to, I would say probably 25% of them knew who I was because of the emails. And these are people that I had never talked to before. There were online leads that came in, they had maybe bought with somebody else, that we missed the deal or whatever it might have been, but they knew who I was. And that is the really important part. All right, let's go into step number 5, which is writing good emails. Because you're a real estate agent, it does not mean you are a professional copywriter, and that's totally fine. But what I'm about to share with you is going to be probably really good news for you to hear. Is when we were doing research on what should our newsletter look and sound like, it was really nice to see that it should be text-based versus pretty and fancy. But the other thing was, it should be incredibly simple to read. And what we found was we should be writing at a 3rd grade reading level. I'll diverge here for a second and explain why. Is when you speak and when you write at a lower reading level, you are just opening up to more people. When I started writing my email newsletter, I thought I needed to sound smart and fancy. So I was writing at a 12th grade reading level. And the reality is some people don't read at a 12th grade reading level. And some people might not have known the fancy words that I was using. So dumbing it down to a 3rd grade level has made me have to better understand what I'm saying. It also makes it just easier to digest. Nobody's reading your email newsletter and combing through every single word. Most people are scamming through it. They're scanning, they're looking for something interesting, and then they'll read if they want to. So writing at a third grade level is something that makes a huge impact. Also, I'll give you another thing is anytime I go to a conference or I'm around the real estate industry of other agents, just like you, I inevitably will run into somebody who's on my agent email list or my consumer email list, and they'll always come up to me and they'll say, "Hey Christian, your emails are so good. What company do you use? Or how do you write them?" And oftentimes what they're looking for is, hey, you can go pay this company and they'll do it for you. Or they're gonna ask like, hey, how do you have ChatGPT do this for you? And the reality is I write all of our emails. That's why they're good. They are, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I know what I'm talking about in real estate. So when I'm talking about real estate, the email's good quality, especially when I'm talking about how to be a successful real estate agent. I know how to be a successful real estate agent. So it isn't a ChatGPT prompt of write me an email newsletter about the Orange County housing market or what are the 5 tips to sell more houses. I strive for a 3rd grade writing level. At worst case, I'm going to submit a 5th grade reading level, maybe on a market update with a lot of numbers, but I really try my best to get it as low as possible. Also, we want to make sure there's no hard to read sentences, because if somebody gets stuck on something, they're just going to stop reading. They're not going to continue. So Hemingway app is where I write everything, and then I transfer it over to whatever I'm going to send it from. Now, the other thing I do is your subject line is incredibly important when it comes to your open rate. If you have a bad subject line in a great email, most people aren't going to click on the email to begin with, so they're not going to open it. But if you have a great subject line and how to get good at writing subject lines, I use the subject line tester on OmniSend. So go to omnisend.com and find the subject line tester. Very simple. I just have it bookmarked once I found it. And what I've noticed is over the last year or so of using it, in the beginning when I was writing subject lines, I was getting back and they were saying, oh, this is a really bad one, change these things. And now, more often than not, when I type in the subject line, it actually rates pretty darn good to where I'm not changing as much stuff, which means I got better at writing subject lines over the last year or so. All right, step number 6. This is your writing framework, and we are almost done with the actual structure. Step number 7, I'm going to talk about the most important thing for you to implement this, but do not skip step number 7. But anyway, for step number 6 is the writing framework. I started with this framework. I learned it from a copywriter, and I have not skipped it at all. I have a template that I follow. It's very simple, and I'll put it on the screen right here. I start with what is the topic of the video. The next thing I write down is what is the goal of this video. I mentioned that earlier. Then I say what is the subject. Pro tip, if your email service provider lets you A/B test your subject line, do it every time. So I'll write subject and then A and B for the A/B test, and then the body of the text. That's it. Very simple. So you're going to say, what is the topic? What is the goal? What is the subject? And then the body of the text. That's just how I format it. Now, I will say, when I'm actually writing the email, I write the topic first. So, for example, when I wrote the script for this is an email newsletter I sent out. This video you're watching, I put it in an email format. I said, what's the topic? And it's like how to start your email newsletter for real estate agents. Subject line was, I sent 234,000 emails so you don't have to. And that was one of the A/B tests. Now, instead of doing the subject next, I write the whole body of the email, and then I place the subject line that I feel like I take the most interesting part of the entire body and I make that the subject line. Just like in this video, the hook of this video was, I sent 234,000 emails in the last 90 days and here was the outcome, right? So that's the same idea as making that hook. So that's it. It's a very simple writing framework. You do your topic, you do your goal, write the body, put in the subject line, make sure you're writing this in Hemingway, make sure you go to OmniSend to test the subject line. If you're at a 3rd or 4th grade level and your subject line is an 80 plus, you're going to be good to go to send that email. Now, before I go on to step number 7, I want to first of all thank you for making it this far in the video. If you've liked this content so far, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I make stuff like this every single week so that you have a better time growing your business. I also have a totally free community where I have a full training of this entire thing, along with a sales training on our sales process, sales scripting framework, and a lot of other trainings that are coming as well too, including our full buyer agency training. So if you're interested in that, go to onyxhomes.com/school, SKOOL. We'll have it right down here and in the description down below. And register there. It's totally free. We give as much information for you as possible, like we said, just so you can grow your business. Okay, now let's move on to step number 7, which, like I said, is the most important thing possible. So this is a huge warning and red flag. If you do not do this correctly, you can get thrown in email jail, which is never going to be a good thing. But here's how you do it, is I'm gonna give you an example. Let me just say that you have 2,000 leads in your database. Now, if you have 200 or 20,000 or 200,000, the same idea will apply. But let's say you have 2,000 leads in your database. What you don't do is you don't just add the 2,000 leads and send an email. That is how you get thrown to email jail. Here's what you're gonna do. Take your 2,000 leads and take the top 10%. So if you know, like, take the top 10% of people who you know are like most likely to engage with your email, right? They're gonna open it, your friends, your family, your coworkers, whatever it is, your people who are unlikely to unsubscribe. That's probably the best way to put it. You're gonna put them on your email list, and then you're gonna follow steps 1 through 6, and you're gonna send your first email, right? Rip the Band-Aid off, do this week. I send mine on Friday. I send my agent newsletter on Thursday. So if you just want to pick those and not do any research ahead of time, that's totally fine. You can play with it later. So write your email, follow the 6 steps, send it to the top 200 people. Now, if you get above a 25% open rate through your email service provider, will tell you exactly what your open rate is. If you get above a 25%, you're going to add more people to that list. So you're going to take the 200 you had and you're going to add 10%. So you're going to add 20 more. And then next Friday, you're gonna send you're gonna follow the 6 steps again. You're gonna send your next email newsletter to 220 people. And then you're gonna get above a 25% open rate again, and you're gonna add 40 more people. And then you're gonna add 60 more people until you have all of your list, assuming your open rate stays above 25%. Now, here's the other pro tip as well too, is every single lead that you generate, you're doing an open house, you do online ads, you are farming and you get somebody to scan on your postcard, whatever it might be, all of those leads also get added to your newsletter. Now, because those leads just opted into something, those are gonna be higher intent leads that are likely to engage anyway. So as long as you're seeing above a 25% open rate, keep growing your list. Now, let me give a big disclaimer here, is you should not or cannot be emailing people who have not given you permission to email them. If somebody has handed you their email address, you can email them. But you don't want to go buy an email list and start emailing them. That's definitely the wrong way to do this. But all your database that you actually have, that's how you do it. And yes, this is the slow and steady way to grow your email list, but it'll do it without you getting thrown in email jail. So I want to make sure that you are slow and steady when you grow your list. This is why it's the most important one, and I made a huge point not to skip, because I've seen people do this and they added 2,000 people on their first email, had a 4% open rate, and then could never get out of that jail without having to switch email domains and all kinds of different things we don't want to be dealing with. Now, like I said, if you want a way more in-depth training on this, including me sharing my screen and walking through, also having direct access to me and my marketing manager, including a ton of other trainings, go to onyxhomes.com/school, register for that community. It's totally free. You get access to me and my team and the full-on training. 2 things will happen. 1, you'll get access to that community. And 2, I'll add you to my agent newsletter that I send out every single Thursday, so you can see how to do that as well too. Now, to get the most out of your email newsletter, you're gonna be sending awesome content. So you wanna send it to as many people as possible, which means you're gonna need to know how to generate leads. So if you wanna see my daily schedule that helped me generate a ton of leads and do over $1 million in commissions just my first 2 years in the business, I've got this other video for you that'll really walk you through my entire schedule.